Yeah, a good government job that you can work 30 years and get a pension and retire.
Hmm.
But I feel like they couldn't phantom a world outside of like your basic ordinary job. So, but me, like my personality, like I've always been as a person, like outside of the box, even before. And I would say that you realize that you're kind of outside of the box early, and like even before, like
Hmm.
I've always known that um I was outside of the box that people try to put me in, even when I was like in late middle school to high school. Like I realized that I'm going to do more than my parents in life,
Right.
you know. Um,
All right. Hey, we're back. Sorry, we had a little bit of a glitch. So if it sounds like there was not a smooth transition just prior to this, that's my fault. So here's Randy again. Sorry, Randy, you were talking about how you were really thinking out of the box
yeah,
and in unconventional ways about your future and who you were as a person.
yeah. So I would say like definitely thinking outside of the box. Um, realizing that realizing the limitations of just the thought process of my parents and like the environment I was raised in, they was raised in, but like how how black folks like us growing up in the projects like kind of get put in a box and we can only go so far, even the school, even from the school teachers state that we deal with in school. They can't even think outside of the box for us. They're like, oh,
Right.
you'll be great at this or that, but like they, especially having predominantly black school teachers, they wasn't exposed to this type of world as well. So like I've always been curious about the world. So I guess the curiosity led me to researching other, you know, how do the world's richest people get rich? Like, that's me as a
Right.
teenager, like, what do they do? Like, what's different, than like the people I see every day, And
Hmm.
then it's like, you get a newspaper, you see the business section, you look at the business and, oh, this person is the CEO of this. Well, who works for this person, or this person CEO of that, and how did this person? So then I started thinking those terms, like I want to be like that. So that's how I ended up wanting to go into investment banking and anything that has to do with finance and all of that, right?
Hmm.
But I ran into the conundrum that I really didn't have money to pay for college. I knew I had to go to
Right.
college. I had the grades to go to college. I didn't really have help applying to college, despite saying you got school counselors, but I didn't have applying to college. I didn't have the resources. So the military was the option to pay for college for me.
Right.
Right. So that's when I decided to join the military. And what made it easier for me to join the military was I was in high school. I was already in JROTC.
Uh-huh. Right.
So it was like it made it that much easier. Like, well, it was
And did you have other
just
family members who were in the military?
no. Well, not really, not
Okay.
actively at the time, or
Right.
um, but it was a strategic move for me because when you're in JROTC, if you got 3 years of JRTC, you come in as a private first class. So
Gotcha.
you already start off three ranks ahead. So
Gotcha.
it was a strategic move for me because, like, hey, I'm gonna come in, make more money, and get this GI Bill. So now that I decided on that, okay, what do I want to do in the military? Well, I have to be something that's if I decide to get out, I can actually get a job. Like I'm not gonna go in
Right.
and do something stupid in the military where I can't get a job afterward, like be a petroleum specialist or something like that.
Right.
Right.
And is it so in the when you went in, do they test you and do like aptitude tests or how do you,
Yeah, so
they
they do the ASVAB test, right? That's like an aptitude test. I would say it's almost like a GED type test to me, right? Except
Mhm.
for they do a little bit of math, they do a little bit of reading, but then they do like they add in stuff like basic mechanical stuff and things like that. and motor vehicles, like stuff like that, like trade type thing to see if you fit in a specific trade for the military.
Right.
So I decided beginning of the summer of senior year of high school that I was going to go the military route, to pay for college. And I talked to a recruiter. The recruiter's like, "Oh, sure, right." The recruiter took me to the ASVAB. That's what it's called, the ASVAB, the aptitude test or whatever the military call it nowadays. And I took it like cold turkey. Most people study for it. They just took me to take it. Like, hey, let's just see how you do on the test. So they took me take it. I was like summer of 11th grade. Took it, and then I got like a 61 on it, right? But I was like, 61, ain't no way I got a 61. That's failing, right? But it's different. It's different in the military. Like in order to pass this exam, you gotta get like a 33 or something like that, 35. Right. So it's like, no, no, no. I thought I failed, but it's actually not like a pass fail type exam. It's like they categorize all the different sections of the test. And considering that I just took it like spur of the moment, I did really, really well. They was like, well, you qualify for pretty much any job in the military, right?
And did you know what branch you wanted to go in at that time, or?
No, I was in Army JROTC, so I just stuck with that, for the most part. Plus they had the Army Reserve bases close to DC, close to home. So at the time they only presented certain jobs to me. And of all the jobs they presented, ironically, it was a healthcare job. It was a medical laboratory technician, right? Working in a hospital lab. And now I remember it. I wanted to go in for there was another job I wanted to go in for. I think it was respiratory therapist or something like that.
Right.
I wanted to do. And when I finally got to the MEPS where they swear you in and all of that, they was like, "Oh, we don't have that job no more." The military with their tricks.
Right.
But we have these options. I was like, all right, which one pays the most bonus money? And it's like, all right, this lab, they got the most bonus money. All right, well, sign me up for that one. So I ended up doing that one. And then the neat thing about that degree was, working in the hospital lab is pretty tough. You got to be pretty intelligent to be a lab person. Most of those guys are like nerdy, right? After you finish that program in the military, I think if you take 2 classes of English and 2 classes of college math, you get an associate degree.
Oh, wow. That's great.
So they give you an associate degree from George Washington University. They have a collaboration with GW University, the military does. So like once you finish your training with the military, you take those 4 additional classes for your and you get an associate's degree right away.
And were you based back in Washington? Were you?
Yes, I was based at Walter Reed, the old Walter Reed.
The old one, right? Okay.
I was based at the old hospital, Walter Reed, and I did that, work in the lab. But then, like, I came home from training. Then I worked at LabCorp in Arlington, and all over the place, and kind of just did that. Still keeping in mind I wanted to do the investment banking thing. I would still like I think I was 18 years old when I began I really became more interested in financing and trading stocks and stuff like that, because I used to do it like I used to follow and track stock. The only method we had was the newspaper.
Right? Yeah, the finance.
The newspaper, right?
Yeah, many people don't remember that or know what
so when I'm on my way to work to LabCorp in the morning, I'll pick up a newspaper, and then like my downtime, I'll be just looking at stock, tracking certain stock.
Right.
And then that's how I got into stock, like tracking from the newspaper and watching stuff like, IPOs and stuff like that. Like I remember, I think like when I really was into it, was like that's when Sirius started, like, and XM started, like, were we're head to head with each other.
Right. Oh yeah,
And
back in
then,
the day. And were
yeah.
you deploying also in the military, or were you able to stay local in
So
that
I was able to stay
rank?
local up until 2002, the end of 2004, I believe, and that's when they activated my unit, my hospital unit, Walter Reed. They
Gotcha.
activated my hospital unit, Walter Reed, in 2004, which is ironic, right? It's crazy, right? Because up until that time, I was kind of tired of the military and going every once a month. And then my father was like, "Hey, you need to go there before they lock you up. You need to. No, don't you got drilled today?" I was like, "I think so." Like, you better get up and go there before they come arrest you or something like that. Because I was getting tired,
So
right?
at this point, you had transitioned to from active to reserves,
Yeah, I
and,
transitioned to
and so
reserves
you
at
were
this point, and
living
I was
that
getting
quasi civilian life.
yeah, yeah. So I had my little job, and I was just tired of the military at this point because we weren't doing anything.
Right.
So I was like gonna skip out on my reserve weekend, and my father told me he told me get up and go before I get in trouble. So I go in that morning, and it's like I was like, where's my name at? Why is my name was written on the top of the list. That was like on the top of the sign-in roster. It was separate. They read it by hand. I was like, why's my name up here? Like, oh yeah, yeah, you gotta report to the mobilization base. I was like, what the fuck? I gotta
Wow.
report where? So it was
Wow.
ironic. The day I showed up, the day I was about to skip, it's like, yeah, you have to be at Fort Belvoir on Monday because you getting mobilized and possibly deployed.
Wow. Big change. That's not
So it was a
what you're
big change.
expecting. Yeah.
Yeah, it was not what I was expecting. It was a surprise. The one day I was gonna skip out was the day that, hey, you get mobilized, deploy, right?
Uh-huh.
So I get there. It was sudden. It was sudden. Here's why it was sudden, because I had signed up for George Mason University.
Okay.
I had signed up for classes. Like I signed up for classes. I signed up for business. I signed up for business school at George Mason University to get a degree in business.
All
And
right.
I had all of my semester paid for with scholarships and GI Bill, and I was going to make like $3,000 back from the GI Bill. Right? Like all of my classes, I had a full load starting in September.
You had it all sorted out.
I had it all set it out, and I was supposed to start school in a week.
Wow.
In a
Wow.
week, I was supposed to start school.
The
I
military
show up
had some
there,
other plans for you.
other plans for me. Like I went down, I applied to George Mason University, got into the business degree thing, had all my classes. Like I had everything scheduled, my classes booked and all of that.
Hmm.
And then guess what? I'm deploying. I got to cancel everything. Like all of the I was
Wow.
everything paid for already. I had to cancel everything like within like a week.
Right. And at that time, were they able to hold your spot or the money or, because
George
of
Mason
deployment?
to hold the spot.
Uh-huh.
Um, they weren't able to hold the money because it was like scholarship.
Right.
DC give out a little scholarship here, had several scholarships, and then I had the GI Bill, and it was like, and I was making money, and I was set to go.
Mm.
So
And for
I
folks who
got
don't
I
know,
got shut down.
George Mason University is here in Virginia, and it is a top-notch school. This is a
Yeah,
very high-ranking university.
yeah,
Um,
it was a beautiful campus, right? So I had to cancel everything. I get down to the base, and they split my unit in half. They split my unit in half. They sent half of my unit to Iraq and half to Fort Stewart, Georgia.
wow, lucky.
So yeah, so they
That's
split my
wild.
unit in half.
So
They
where
split
did
my
you end up
unit in half.
going?
But I was on the half that got sent to Fort Stewart, Georgia, though.
Wow. Okay.
So it was interesting that they split my unit in half, and I got sent to Georgia, and the other half got sent to Iraq that year. So that's what happened with that. I was in Georgia for Stewart for 18 months.
Oh, wow.
18 months with the 3rd Infantry Division.
Gotcha. Well, thank you for your service also. I also want to acknowledge that. And, the thing here, like speaking with you, Randy, and for folks listening, or if you're watching the podcast on YouTube or listening somewhere else, there are people, like Randy, who are pioneers in many ways, right? Many people are the first person to go to college in their family, their generation, or like you going in the military also and college. And, really without having a lot of role models, in the community or in the family structure, many of us were the first to go to college. I was the first in my generation, in my family. My father was a high school dropout, and it's very difficult when you don't have anybody to show you how to navigate just the basic things like applying for college or how to choose a college, or even and student loans can be very predatory.
Yes.
Very, very predatory situation that many of us get kind of sucked into, like, oh, okay, I guess I'll make this much money, and you're thinking you're rolling the dice, but then later you're going to have some big payments. And or it could be, any number of things. But when you don't have somebody to help you along the way structurally, it's a big difference, because in that world where people have generational wealth, or generations going to college, there's a lot of, leg ups that are given to people. There's a lot of, hey, no problem, come over here, I'll give you a job, a side job in college, or I'll help you with your application, or I got an inside, I'm part of some organizations giving scholarships, and we'll give you a scholarship kind of thing. So those things, when you don't have any of that and you just have to create it from scratch, I mean, this
Exactly.
it's a huge challenge, and it can be daunting. And then sometimes people make it half of the way through, and then they just they quit because they can't see themselves being sustainable. So I just want to applaud you and acknowledge that, of what you're creating, right? What you are creating,
So,
what you did create and what you continue to. So
so
tell us
I,
more.
so I think this generation now has more of an advantage than we had, because like we had, like I grew up, we had to use a typewriter.
Right, right. Yes.
So like I got my world news from from the encyclopedia and National Geographic. That's how I
Right.
learned about different cultures and things like that. Like
Yeah.
the internet wasn't really prevalent for us until like I got to like middle high school.
Right.
Even though it was around, it wasn't prevalent because we couldn't afford to have it. We didn't have computers and stuff like that. There was no social media. I think the first social media platform I used was called Black Planet or something like that, and that was back when in like
MySpace days.
I don't even think MySpace was out yet at the time.
Right. Yeah.
Like it was pre MySpace.
Mhm.
But the neat thing about this generation now is like you can actually see and reach out to people in different areas of the world and different fields and all of that. Like it's like thrown in your face now,
Mhm.
all the different careers and jobs and things you could
It can be
become
actually
versus.
overwhelming. It's almost like it's too much information,
Hmm.
right? When you talk about like having to look at the newspaper for the financial reports. Well, that was just printed once a day. You weren't getting, 500 updates throughout
Hmm.
the day. And sometimes it can be too much information or hard to narrow it out and niche in or figure out,
Yeah.
okay, where do I need to look? Or there's
So I
so
think we have gotten to that point where it's almost too much because there was no YouTube back then
right.
and things like that. There was no Google. There was only Yahoo and MSN, but and Hotmail and all of that stuff. But the point being is like I didn't get to see all the different options I have now for a career back then.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
I was limited to like what's in my neighborhood, my environment. Like there might be lawyers, there might be doctors when I go to the doctor, there might be policemen, government workers, firemen. But like now you get to see other than doctors, you got me, certified registered nurse anesthetist, you got you got bankers, you got entrepreneurs, you got freaking YouTube stars, you got everything. You
Right.
so you
Yeah.
got options growing up as a child nowadays.
The possibilities are endless, right? And I think, yeah, I mean, I grew up, I went to school in kind of inner city, and I mean, yeah, I mean, we didn't have career counseling. You know, we were just on our own to go to college or figure out what we were doing or how we were going to pay for it. Um, so
Mhm.
you're in active duty. You got activated. You do this time in Georgia. You come back from that, and at any point, you're thinking, "Am I going to go back to? Are you going to go back to the George Mason?
Oh,
Resume
so
college
interesting.
or?"
Yeah, so interesting enough. While I was on active duty down in Georgia, I had a friend of mine, a couple of friends of mine, got sent with me because they were in the military with me in the same. One was in the same career field, lab field, and the other guy was a respiratory therapist. We got sent to Georgia. We became close friends, right? So mind you, like I think I was the oldest of the bunch. No, I wasn't the oldest. It was my other friend. He's a year older than me. None of us had college degrees at the time, but like we kind of clicked and we kind of got along. Now obviously, like they both of them were intelligent. Um, so as we got closer and closer towards the end of our 18-month deployment time, we had decided, hey, um, we should do something career wise similar, right? So one friend of mine, Travis Sorensen, he was originally supposed to set to be a engineer major, an architect or something like that. And I don't know how I did it, but I talked him out of it. Just talk him out of it. I was like, nah, man, because I ain't gonna lie, man. We used to,
That's
man,
boring.
I know it's crazy, right? I talked them out of it. We started taking classes, free classes the military offered together. I talked them out of it. I talked them into going into business world with me. Like, let's go into the business world and do this and that and that. So I talked them into it. And then my other friend, he was already set. He wanted to be a doctor or whatever. The respiratory therapist guy, he wanted to be a doctor or whatever. So when we finished, we all applied to University of Maryland together
Oh,
and
gotcha.
got
Okay,
in. So I didn't go back to George Mason. I went to University of Maryland after I got back.
gotcha.
College Park.
So you really
Uh,
created a pact that as a team you were going to do something to support each
yeah,
other and raise each other up, help each other out.
yeah, because we were down there. We were down there together, and we were figuring out how to, capitalize off of being mobilized and all of the military money they were giving away, as far as like a per diem and all of that stuff. We ended up like going out renting a house and all this other stuff. So we had the same mindset, right?
That's
Um,
excellent. That's
So we
excellent.
ended up going to the University of Maryland. I went to the University of Maryland. They wouldn't let me into the business program,
Okay.
uh, which is interesting. So in lieu of going into business, I started off as I just went in and did the econ major.
Gotcha.
So I just did economics major. I think he got it. I think he got into the business program. He might have applied earlier than me, and then my other friend went pre med. So I
Wow.
started off. He started off business. I started off. He started off business at University of Maryland. I went economics major, and the other one went pre med.
And econ is math heavy, right? I mean, econ is
Yeah,
that's like you got. I mean,
econ math.
yeah.
So like that was like I had one of my toughest semesters in school. Like I was taking like 19, 21 credit hours, something like that. I was taking
Wow.
microeconomics, macroeconomics. Plus I was working on I was taking online classes through the military at a program I started the accounting degree with,
Oh, wow.
but I wanted to finish. So I was taking micro, macro, accounting, this, that. I was taking so many math heavy courses that semester. I took 6 classes that semester: statistics, um, finance, like some type of corporate finance class. So economics, macroeconomic, corporate finance, uh, physics, um, physics, statistics. Yeah,
Wow. That's so you just took on a huge load. You were like, let me just get through this.
I was just like, I'm about it. Like, I'm gonna pass these classes.
You're
I
committed. High commitment
am
level.
committed. I don't know why I did it, but like, I managed to escape that semester with just over 3.0.
Wow, that's amazing.
Because it was like math heavy. Like,
Yeah,
I'm taking not physics. Physics is math heavy to begin with, right?
right,
Then you
right.
take a micro and macroeconomics. Then you take an accounting and a finance class. And then I was taking poetry.
That's good. That's a good balance. That's a good
No,
balance.
no, the poetry class was the only class I had to drop. I had to drop poetry. Like, I didn't understand it. My first
Right,
exam, I failed it. I was like, you know what? I'm dropping this course.
right,
That's the only
right,
class I had to drop was poetry. Like, of all the classes, poetry, like me and whatever the hell they saying don't make sense. Like,
right.
I'm just, my brain does not function that way.
Right. Yeah, yeah. Well,
Like
especially when you're
abstract
so
like that.
heavy in the analytical stuff, right? To make that switch to do like some, there's also like
Super abstract and all that.
it's
I
abstract.
couldn't make my brain couldn't make that switch. Like, it
Yeah.
was like I'm into concrete, analytical,
Hmm.
mathematics, economics, finance, accounting. No, that's what my brain's into. Like, you
And all that
talking.
math expertise really leans itself into then later becoming the CRNA, which is you got to use math
Mhm.
there too. That's I'm guessing a pretty math heavy curriculum as well, or
It is,
calculation.
it's some math, but it's a lot of physiologically, physiolo- physiology. I can't. I'm sorry, I'm
Right. A lot
not
of
pronouncing it correct.
physiology, but then there's like the
Physiology, yeah,
formulas and yeah, I mean now
yeah,
it's all like
understanding.
now there's apps, right? Now there's apps to figure out all the
Yeah,
body
I
math
mean,
and bits.
I still don't really use the apps that much,
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a lot of apps for everything we do. Um, but yeah, so that's how I ended up doing that. And then lo and behold, uh, I get back. So I got back in 2006, and then I began working I was a lab person. I was working and going to school at the same time. So
Right.
got back in 2006, found a job in the hospital lab again. Um, in a hospital lab, Southern Maryland, to be honest with you.
Oh, okay.
Um, and was going to school. And then I get mobilized again at the end of 2007.
What? Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
2007 was like,
Yeah.
you're mobilized again.
Right. Yeah, and I think the 2000, I mean the 19 mid 1990s, 2000s, I think there was probably a lot of mobilizations of reserve
Yeah, so it was
units.
the peak of the war between like
Yeah.
2005 to like 2009 or 10. It was like the
Mhm.
peak of the war. It was Afghanistan and Iraq, and it
Right.
was the peak. So I got mobilized again like a year, like 15 months later for another. This time I was mobilized from 2000 end of 2007 to 2012.
Wow. Holy
Yeah,
cow. That's a long tour. That's a long
yeah,
time.
to 2012. So it
So
was
how
it
did
was
you so how did you end up finishing that program? Did you end up like how
at
did you start
Maryland.
all that?
No, I had to drop University of Maryland after a while. Like, they can only hold the seat for so long, but it was
Right.
cool. Like, I ended up finishing the program, the accounting degree, and
Mhm.
then I ended up finishing the finance degree. Um, while I was mobilized. I mean, it was a long road, but like,
Yeah. And it
then I
wasn't
could
that
do.
common then to have online classes either. I mean, there's different
No,
programs in the
I mean, there
military,
was
but
a few online classes, but a lot of military bases, they had the they had actual like actual education centers where you could go take the class
right,
in the
like satellite,
afternoon.
kind of a satellite program.
Satellite classes you can take.
Yeah.
And then they just started working around to online classes as well for some of those degrees, some of those classes. So I ended up with some online classes. But toward the end of that, that's when I ran into my CRNA mentor. When I got stationed again, and after I came off the active duty, I got stationed again in Virginia, just outside of Fort Belvoir.
Okay. Gotcha.
um, at a hospital unit, and that's when they had broke up Walter Reed, I
Oh, right.
believe.
Right. Yeah.
They broke up Walter Reed at that point, and they put the hospital down in Virginia somewhere. So I got sent back to them in Virginia, and that's when I found out about the CRNA field. Like at this
Okay.
point, I'm getting older. At least I felt like I'm getting older. You know, plans wasn't going how I wanted to go to be an investment bank and all this stuff. And
Right.
I'm getting older, and I just want to do something that's going to be a good career, and I'm gonna make decent money. So ran into my CRNA mentor. I was stationed with him and a bunch of surgeons and nurse practitioners and things like that. And he was telling me, he was a engineer, and he went back to school to become a CRNA.
Wow. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a really good time. I'm guessing. I mean, looking back and then where we're at now,
Mm-hmm.
2023, to really get into that field. Um,
Yeah,
I mean, because right now it seems like it's I'm guessing a little more competitive, and
it's crazy competitive now.
saturated, and it's and grown because we're not getting anesthesiologists coming out of med school. That's I think it's
Yeah,
becoming. I don't know, and I'll let you talk about that. Like as far as like the rate, the proportions of CRNAs to anesthesiologists. But it seems like it's growing. Rapidly.
so the interesting thing about the CRNA anesthesia certified registered nurse anesthetist field is it's growing, but it's not growing at the same pace as like nurse practitioners grew.
Right,
And part of the reason is because we just don't have the amount of schools, right?
right. The seats, the number of
The,
seats. Yeah,
the number of seats to put out that many uh, students. Another thing is that our program is more structured than like nurse practitioners. So when
right,
you develop a CRNA program, in order for you to have a CRNA program, you have to have signed agreements with hospitals for your
right,
students to come perform anesthesia and do their clinicals. It's not the same with nurse practitioner school where you have to a lot of schools you have to go find a preceptor in it and stuff
right.
like that. You have to have signed the school have to have signed agreements with hospitals.
Right. And
So
in NP, you're going to be outpatient situations,
mhm.
and either seeing a certain number of patients or a certain number of hours. But that's a whole different thing to get hospital affiliations. And those
Yes.
agreements are very, very difficult to get for,
Yes,
especially
they
like,
are very difficult to get. Um, Believe it or not, but the one thing about CRNA school is the students, as a student, when you're in the ORs, you can actually bill for us.
wow,
They
really?
could bill for us working in they actually bill for us working in the ORs. Like
Huh,
we get reimbursed from Medicare, Medi-Cal, um,
interesting.
for our services as student registered nurse anesthetists.
So
So
that's like, is that like the only type of nursing where that gets billed as a
I
student?
believe so. I believe so. I don't know if nurse practitioners could be billed for, but we can be billed for. We're billed for. We're billed for at the same rate as a regular practicing CRNA is.
Wow. And so even
Yes.
though there's another anesthesiologist that's actually there getting billed also, they're able
Yeah.
to bill
So what
you
happens
guys.
is, and that's what people don't understand about anesthesia billing, it's almost like a pyramid scheme, right? You can,
Tell us
it is,
about it.
right?
Tell us more
So
about
like
this.
me, I can precept two CRNA students. I could put them in their own room, and all I got to do is go back and forth watching them. Yet I could bill for both cases, 100% for both students.
What? Interesting.
Yeah.
So you can they allow you to supervise two students. That's allowable, is what you're saying.
Hmm.
And then you can bill for both
For both.
as
The
if you're
students can't bill for, I can bill for them.
right. But as if you're
The
in two places
reimbursement is
at one
going to be the
time.
same though, regardless.
Wow. Wow. That's interesting. Okay, food
And it's
for
the
thought.
same with anesthesiologists in some practices that's not independent.
Mhm.
they could supervise up to 4 CRNAs. So the way that works is they get half of the 4 CRNAs billing. They get 50% of their billing, even
And
though they.
and where does the other 50% go?
So 50% go to the CRNA and 50% go to the anesthesiologist. So imagine you got 4 CRNAs
Uh-huh.
and one anesthesiologist supervising these 4. You get 50% of those 4.
And this is post licensure you're talking about, not student.
Yeah, this
Okay.
is post licensure.
Post licensure.
So that's the neat, interesting thing about anesthesia billing. Like they could supervise and really don't have to do much in the case, honestly, but like review a chart or two, right?
Right.
And say agree to a plan, and the CRNAs do the case, and bam.
And that's like, I'm sure, much more prevalent at big hospitals running big
Yeah,
large ORs, right? Big
yeah,
medical centers.
exactly.
So you
So
decide, you meet this individual that's, hey, I'm a CRNA. You get turned on to this new field, nursing, and becoming an advanced practice, which is, a road, right? That's a path. This is not an overnight
yes,
endeavor to reverse
yes,
engineer becoming a CRNA.
yes.
And
So
what did
so
you?
essentially that's what I did, right? Essentially that's what I did. Like mind you, I just finished my bachelor's in finance, accounting. Um, I'm a lab person at this junction. And I'm like, okay, here's my goal. I want to be a CRNA. So how do I get there? He told me the process, and I said, okay, let's do it. Let me figure out first. Let's get into school. Let's get into a nursing program. Like, can I
Right,
get into a program? Do I have to do an entire nursing degree when I
right,
already have a bachelor's degree? Look that up. Well, no, I don't have to do an entire nursing degree because I have a bachelor's degree. I don't have to do a 4 year like
right,
for step one because I didn't want to do that. Right? If I was going to do 4 more years of school, then I might as well just go to medical school at this point. Right?
right. Yeah,
So
exactly.
I looked up a direct entry MSN program, and then I found out about the accelerated BSN program.
Hmm.
Well, the way I see it was I would have had to wait another year just to apply to an MSN program.
Hmm.
But all I needed was a few classes to apply to an accelerated BSN program. And
Hmm.
I picked the accelerated BSN program at Rutgers University, um, because I just needed a few more science classes to apply to that program. So I got into the accelerated BSN program, and it was 15 months.
Wow.
It's a 15-month straight program.
And for folks who
Um,
don't know about these accelerated BSN programs or MSN programs, the pace is very intense.
yeah,
I did an ADN. I already had a degree, so it was very easy when I did my BSN later. But these accelerated programs are no joke. I mean, you have an exam, weekly,
yeah,
papers due every day, plus you're doing your clinicals. I mean, it is
exactly.
24/7. Not, I mean, takes a huge amount of commitment, and also you don't have room for error. So you have to be
No,
incredibly smart to move through these programs.
there was no fail in the class in these programs because you have to meet the core standards. So if they only offer that certain class once a year.
Right,
So
right.
if you fail that class, you can't graduate.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
So I took that. That was a pretty intense class, especially in New Jersey.
yeah.
Um, um, but it was doable for me. It was 15 straight months work, class work, didactic, and clinicals that we had to go through. And me being a financial savvy guy, part of the reason I took the accelerated BSN program because I had converted over to post 9/11 GI Bill at the time. So
Right,
I'm doing the finance in my mind. Do I really want to go to school and take out student loans?
right.
And the way I looked at it, the school actually covered my post 9/11 GI Bill actually covered the program, the entire program.
Wow. That's great. Another strategic
So
move, another very strategic move. Like,
Yeah, it was pretty strategic, and I'm gonna tell you how strategic it was. I came off of active duty, and this was during the Obama era when he
Mhm.
had just extended in unemployment
Right,
because we were going into that we were just coming out of that depression like state.
right.
So I was drawing unemployment for New Jersey and going to school and collecting my post 9/11 GI Bill with a housing stipend. So I ended up making like $4,000 a month
Right.
just to go to school.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Right. So you had everything paid for, and that's a smart move. And sometimes, sometimes just whatever's going on contextually, historically lines up also. And luck of the draw, you got that additional money. And bravo to
It
you.
lined up perfectly.
Right. It's timing. And so there's all the things we have control over that we have to really nail. And then sometimes we get
Hmm.
lucky and also hit the jackpot with what's going on contextually in the country or, other factors at play. So that's awesome. So you got through Rutgers, that program, and then were off and
And then I
running.
just so I wasn't exactly all. So I got to Rutgers. And by this time I had gotten married to my
Okay.
wife, and my wife's she's a scientist or whatever. Like she's I was stationed in New Jersey, McGuire Air Force Base. She was doing her postdoctorate at Princeton University at the time. So we stayed an additional year
Hmm.
after I came off of active duty. So we stayed in New Jersey an additional year. She was finishing her postdoctorate up at Princeton, and I was doing nursing school at the time.
So wow.
So
So let me get this straight. So you were actually having the time to date and be in a relationship and get married through this program? Is that what you're saying?
yeah, so not the nursing program. I got married before. I
Okay,
got
okay.
married before I started nursing
But
school.
still, that's a
Right.
big load because a lot of relationships would not possibly, may not make it through the stress of all that. That's a lot of
Yeah, so I got married so I got married just before I started the nursing program. Before, right?
okay.
And another part of the reason why I chose the CRNA field anesthesia because of the flexibility of being able to find a job anywhere in the country because I knew my wife, she was
Right.
doing her scientist thing, right?
Mhm. Right. And so where
And
was
she
she
was
gonna
getting her
end up?
postdoc. So I wanted one of us had to have flexibility in our job, and I have more flexibility in my career than she
Right.
does, as far as like being able to pick up and go and find a job just like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was another reason why I chose that field because I knew I could transfer anywhere in the country, right?
Right. Yeah. No, 100%. It's like, you got to figure it out in those in partnerships, is, because not every job is as mobile, right? Not every
Yeah,
career field is as mobile.
exactly, exactly. So once she finished, so she finished her postdoctorate and began applying. She wanted to go into academia. So she finished her postdoctorate at Princeton University, and then she began applying for jobs all over the country. She took her job out here in Utah,
Mm-hmm.
and she took her job before I like when I had like a semester and a half left in nursing school.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right.
So it's like, okay, we going to Utah. So she left. She came out to Utah, started her job, and I was still in New Jersey finishing nursing school.
Right.
So it was like, okay, I got to get a job. The lucky thing is, I got a job at University of Utah, the
Fabulous.
same university she worked at, right?
Wow.
Um, and not only did I get a job, I got accepted into a ICU internship here, 2-year internship here, which was perfect. And it was like
I
all of
mean,
my goals to become a CRNA were just lining up. The
everything was
dominoes were
lining
just
up,
falling into places, right?
right? I'm taking you
They
to
were
Vegas with me. I'm taking you to Vegas with me. You just
so they
got
were
some fun.
falling into a place. They had a military unit out here as well. I could join a hospital unit out here. That because I
Wow.
was still in the military, just on reserve status. I
Yeah.
just transferred my duty over to here. The job fell into place. Um, in order to get the ICU. So you need ICU experience to apply to CRNA school. And what better place to get ICU experience than a level 1 trauma center at an academic institution, right? So it's like, bam, I
So
fell
like
into that.
everything was falling into place. Like you put that intention out in the universe. This is what
Mm-hmm.
needs to happen because it's a lot of different steps, right? Get into nursing school, which can take years sometimes if you got a bunch of prereqs to do.
Yeah. I
Get
was
into an
determined to get into
ICU.
nursing school. I
Yeah.
applied to so many different nursing programs. It wasn't just Rutgers. It was other programs, accelerated BSNs I applied to as well. But I was determined to get into
And
that
that's a good
so
point
much.
to, because I tell people too, I applied to 5 or 6 nursing programs
Mm-hmm.
and, don't just apply to one program and don't be so attached to one particular program. You may have like your top choices, but again, if you've got a goal, you're reverse engineering the goal and you got to just get in somewhere through that
Here's
program.
the ironic thing about that, right? So in New Jersey, you had different programs. It was so many. You had New Jersey and you had Philadelphia right there, right?
Right.
So I was close. I was in Princeton area, so that put me in reach to just about all of it, right? So you had Rutgers University, you
Mm-hmm.
had the College of Medicine and Dentistry of UMDMJ.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what it called. Like it was the University of Medical Dentistry, New Jersey. It was a small college. You had you had Drexel across the bridge. You had UPenn across the bridge. You had LaSalle. You
Right.
had Thomas Jefferson. You had all of these nursing programs around. So I applied to all of them. I
Yeah.
got into UMDMJ, the University of Medical Dentistry, New Jersey, accelerated BSN program. I applied to Rutgers as well. I didn't get
Mm-hmm.
accepted into Rutgers accelerated BSN program. They didn't let me in, you guys. But I got into DNJ. And then like my last semester, Rutgers took over the college I was
Oh,
in.
okay. Right.
They
Yeah. They took
absorbed it.
over.
They
Yeah.
absorbed it.
Mm-hmm.
They absorbed our program because our program had the accelerated BSN program, and we had my program. We had a CRNA program as well.
Oh, wow. So you
So the
so
school,
you so you get through and so now you have a Rutgers degree, which is awesome, right?
yeah,
Which is
yeah, it
very
was crazy. It was a
and
crazy transition.
another
Um,
prestigious university and that's awesome. That cuz that, it can matter where you go to school. I mean, I'm a public
mhm.
school, person. I went to California State University program. But it's, it is important and it can really make the difference. And so, yeah. So once again, fortune favors Randy.
Yeah, yeah, we got absorbed. Like it was like, I applied to Rutgers, they wouldn't let me in, but ironically, they ended up needing to boost their program in
Right.
its own. So they absorbed our program, which had accelerated BSN program and the CRNA program. So they need to boost their program over there. Their
Right.
CRNA pro. I don't think they had a CRNA program at the time. So they took our CRNA program and the nursing program, and then Rowan University took the PA program. So
Oh,
they
gotcha.
split our college down the middle, and then I ended up with a Rutgers degree.
That's great. Yeah, my
Ironically.
college, my nursing program, which was an ADN program, it was one of the top in the state of California. They ended up taking over Compton College, which was their nursing program, through a deal with the state so that they didn't have to close the program entirely. And so, similarly, then everybody, ended up with a pretty well known degree as
Hmm.
an ADN that, because you're looking at test scores, you're looking at, you want to go to a school, you guys, besides just, even if a school may have a good name, they don't always have good test scores and pass rates. So,
Hmm.
that's another thing. You want to look at those pass rates at whatever state there you're in. I think the NCSBS, what is it? NCSBSBN has a website that link that shows you all the pass rates. You can go back 20 years or something on their database for every single school. So you want to be and go, really shoot for a school that has an above a 95% pass rate. You want to get that. I think my school had 97% or something for several years. So that's also important. So you come out, you get into ICU, you're enjoying it, you liked it, you were doing well, I'm
You
sure.
know,
So
I like the ICU for the first couple of years,
yeah,
but um, I liked it for the first couple of years, but then like, you know, I still had the ambition of becoming a CRNA in the back of my mind. So that was
right,
my ultimate goal. The ICU, I looked at just a stepping stone to get there, right?
right.
So I initially applied to CRNA school like just after my first year and didn't get any interviews or anything like that. And I think part of the reason was I didn't take the GRE.
Oh, gotcha.
Right.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And then I applied the second year and then I got a whole bunch of interviews. Maybe I took the GRE at that point. But, you know, I was one of the holdouts. I didn't want to take the GRE. I just want to apply to schools that don't take the GRE. And that's a big mistake right there. Like, take the GRE, open up your options. So I applied, got into, I went on 9 different interviews at different programs all across the country. I was determined to get in a CRNA school, you guys. Like, you know, like I had to go to school in Alaska, I went to school in Alaska.
And so you had an understanding with your wife that wherever it was going to
Hmm.
take you, you were going to go.
Yes, yes,
You
she
were going
knew
to do
that. I knew that. That was the plan. I was like, hey, wherever it's going to take me, I'm going to go. You know, I'm just telling you. So I applied from the East Coast to the West Coast, like everywhere to go to school
And
because I
that's
was
another thing.
determined
I
to
mean,
go.
as nursing schools have become so impacted, even when I went to school in 2005, I mean, I always tell people, look, every other kind of profession, you go wherever you can get in. Don't be attached sitting here waiting because you're going to miss your family or some bullshit like that, right? Because that's just rubbish BS,
Hmm.
right? You got to, if you want something, you've got to take some risks. You've got to be uncomfortable. You've got to risk being lonely, or maybe you're going to live somewhere, maybe you are going to end up in North Dakota, where a friend of mine ended up, in Nebraska, where there was, no wait. They were just bringing in nursing students.
Yes, and they
And
have a big medical center out there in Nebraska, right?
right. And so you just don't know, but be willing to make that change or do whatever it takes, to get the funding to, maybe it means going to take a job at a lower position at a place that offers an education stipend, for example, whatever it might be, take those steps and be willing to do whatever it takes. And so you get in to CRNA school. At this point, you're pretty happy because you were feeling like that was the right time after a couple of years of
Yeah,
ICU.
like everything happens at like it happen. I don't know. I feel like it happens at when it's supposed to happen for you. Like you could try to force it. I think it happens when you're absolutely ready for it, right? And I tell people, um, sometimes you gotta step back and look at the bigger picture, like the long term picture, your long term goal versus like short term discomforts, right?
Exactly. Right. Exactly.
Discomforts, right? So ironically, I got into school Samuel Merritt in Oakland, which is like an hour and 10-minute flight from where I'm at in Salt Lake. So I'm like, man, this is kind of working out well right here. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Another
Like,
top-notch school, by the way, completely
yes, it's a
top-notch
really great
school.
school. Like, it's a really
Very
great
hard to get
school.
into.
So it's like, man, originally I was thinking I was going to end up on the East Coast going to school, like, and it was going to be even more difficult because I'm still in the reserves, mind you, at this time.
Oh,
So
right,
it's like,
right.
man, I got to come back to reserve. But I applied to this program. I didn't even necessarily want to apply to this program. It was like I applied to all these programs. And I'm like, you know what the hell? Because I didn't think I have a chance for that program. Applied. Lo and behold, I got in, and I accepted that program in particular, and it was a master's degree program, so it was even shorter,
Mm.
less time I spent away from home. And the staff there were really awesome, and they were willing to work with me in regards to like the reserves and all of that
Right.
for me because I was still in reserves and I was coming close to retirement like, at this time. Like I'm 16 years in at this point
Wow. Right.
in the
I mean,
military.
And also, so just for clarification, at that time, are all CRNA programs a master's program?
No, some were DMPs and some were masters still.
Gotcha. Okay,
Because
gotcha.
we had already began converting over to masters to DMPs. So some programs already converted over, but
Mhm.
this was 2018. The Council of Accreditation gave all programs to 2025 to be converted.
Okay, so that's the trajectory now. Is it's going to be a DMP program? Here we are,
It, it,
2023.
it's all DMP. So you have to all our CRNA program have to graduate DMPs in 2025,
Gotcha.
which means
Gotcha.
that they have to be converted over by 2022.
Oh, okay. So just on another, so if you wanted to teach, would you
I will
have
have
to
to go
then?
back and get it do a DMP completion,
Right.
which is
Gotcha.
fine. I could like people don't understand DMP like the way DMP set up. You get a DMP in anything nursing related. You
Right.
know, to be
Right.
honest with you, because
Yeah.
it's just the research portion of the degree.
Right. So you've had you finished the CRNA program, and this has just been a couple of years, right? This has been
Yeah, it's
it's been
been since
recent.
20 end of 2020. So damn, I'm getting old.
So you finished during COVID. Was that when you finished your
I
program?
finished during COVID. Yes, I finished
Gotcha.
December 2020.
Wow.
So I think
Okay.
COVID was still going. It definitely was
Yeah.
still
Oh
going
yeah.
because I used to have COVID patients in the OR. So yes.
Wow.
Um. So I finished. It worked out. The neat thing about CRNA program was I still had post 9/11 GI Bill left. You know,
Right.
strategically I planned that out. I had 16 months of GI Bill left. So I needed a program that was going to take my GI Bill plus the Yellow Ribbon program, which
Hmm.
was my program, and it paid for about 60% of my school,
Wow. Wow.
right? And then I had saved up until that point as an ICU nurse, I had saved up roughly around 100 grand
Mm-hmm.
to pay for the rest of school out of pocket.
Wow. So
So when
good
I
money.
graduated CRNA school, I had no debt. I had no debt for my undergrad degrees. I had no debt for my graduate degrees. You know, I might have spent 60 grand out of pocket, but
Right.
graduating with zero student loans or anything like that opens up your options for what kind of job you want to take. Like now I'm not
100%.
stressed like
Right.
other people just to take any job that comes
Well,
along.
just through like the fortune of having those activations of your unit also gave you additional money that you wouldn't have
Mm-hmm.
had,
Mm-hmm.
especially that really long one that you went through. So it all just worked out for
And,
you.
and, and my wife, just having her in general, you know, I didn't have to stress so much about finances for her because she had a good job or whatever.
Right.
She had a good job, so she could cover all the expenses here in Utah, the
Right.
mortgage. Uh,
Right. Because you had to
uh,
set up a household. You had to live in
yeah, so I
Reiki.
basically lived off a budget. I lived on a budget, my GI Bill budget, post 9/11
Mhm.
GI Bill budget. I lived off that budget because they give a housing stipend. I think,
Mhm.
and I was in Oakland, so it's a pretty good one. So you know, had a
Nice.
roommate who covered half the bills, and I pretty much lived off a post 9/11 GI Bill and some savings.
Right. That's awesome. That's incredible. I want to talk about so you get in and you're basically so folks know are like a traveling CRNA. So you work
Hmm.
a 1099 situation. You work when you want to work. You take what contracts you want to take and continue to travel around the country to reach your financial goals. Is that a good way to put it?
Yes, yes, essentially yes. I pretty much do this because the job market in Utah is still pretty bad in regards to
Right.
CRNA practice,
Gotcha.
and the salary is extremely low.
Mhm.
Like extremely low, like below some RNs. Like if you were to take a California RN, they probably make just as much or more than CRNAs here.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I mean, I've seen NP jobs here. If you look for
Hmm.
over $100,000 jobs, it's not RN jobs, it's NP or they want to pay $80,000, $90,000 to NPs, which, you know, I'm just like, what? I've never even made that as a direct care nurse in my career.
Yeah. So part of that reason, I chose to like travel and work versus work in Utah because the salary is extremely low and the practice model like it's really heavily directed. Like I can't do what I want to do.
Gotcha.
And
Okay.
me and my personality just don't fit well with that type of practice model.
Right. Now, do you have to maintain licensure in multiple states? Is it
Yeah,
so,
so anywhere I work, I need to have an RN license and an APRN
so
license.
that's a lot to juggle too, and there's some financial things about that
Yeah,
too.
I'm getting emails right now, and I gotta recertify in different states. I got 3 states I gotta
Right. So you
do,
got to,
including California, and you
yep,
know California is the big one, like
you got to
money
meet all those
wise.
requirements. And not every state, so folks know with nursing, some states like Oregon require a death and dying class for continuing education. You got to take all these
Hmm.
different continuing educations, except for Arizona, which doesn't have any, I believe, if I'm not mistaken.
Hmm.
And they're all different. And so that's a lot just to juggle. And it's, you know, a few $100 here and there or more.
Yeah, yeah. California is gonna cost me about $1,100, right, to renew everything. The neat thing about some of the other states is I do have a Utah RN license, and it's a compact license, so
Right.
I don't have to meet the requirements of those states to keep my RN. The APRN is different. We're
Mhm.
gonna see since I'm renewing now how that goes. I figure it's gonna cost me probably like $25 to $3,000 to renew all my licenses.
But
So
it's overall worth it because of what you're able to generate, the kind of
yeah,
wealth you're generating for your family doing this, and it's a
exactly.
tax write off also, most
Yes,
likely.
it is a tax deduction. Because I'm 1099,
Mhm.
licenses and things like that, I deduct off my taxes because it's a business expense at the end of the day.
Right.
Um, so that's my next endeavor, and I got to apply for a DEA license now, so that's $800.
Oh, right. And that's federal though, right? So you just that's
Hmm.
right. That's all. But that's and is that
So
annual
it's
or
expensive. I think
yes?
those last every 3 years.
Every three, right? Yeah, yeah. You basically, yeah. I'm sure you have a really interesting spreadsheet keeping track of all that stuff. So
Yeah. So
anything else? So I love that you've shared with us, you know, this amazing professional journey you've had of becoming a CRNA and, you know, all of your experiences in the military. Um, you know, I know that you've had some, you know, other experiences also with your health that you've dealt with also to navigate
yes, yes,
and that are very unique. You know, that I was somewhat involved with, you know, last year. Was it last year? Was that last summer?
yes. Yeah,
Uh,
the health thing is always going to be an issue because it's a heredity thing. If you don't know, I have sickle cell disease, sickle cell C disease, and we had a probably my worst sickle cell crisis last year.
mhm.
You remember that when I was hospitalized. So
Very well, vividly, I
yeah,
remember.
up until now, I've been pretty like I'll have a sickle cell crisis once or twice a year, but it's normally not that bad or to
Right.
the extent to where I have to go into a hospital or anything like that.
Yeah.
For some reason, last year, I don't know if it a combination of COVID season or what, but I had a really bad crisis last year that
Hmm.
hospitalized me
Right.
for a week.
And like
Uh,
a lot of people, I mean, and I've had this experience because I was a hospital nurse for 12 years. You know, oftentimes when individuals come in a sickle cell crisis, and it's going to be most often Black folks coming in the
mhm.
hospital in the ER, there it's massively, massively painful, and there's just a lot of things going on. You know, oftentimes folks are treated like they're drug seekers, and
Yes,
you just get really hit in the face with structural racism right off the bat, and at a time when you're literally in a it is literally a crisis. It's called a crisis for a reason. And I myself, you know, witnessed that and saw that or on the inpatient side, when patients made it to the floor or, you know, had to talk to some nurses about their understanding or make sure that we had the proper training, because not everybody really is trained in it, honestly.
and the crazy thing is being a CRNA ICU nurse. You know, I wanted to give the benefit of the doubt,
Right.
especially coming to a hospital. You know, these
Right.
are nurses. I've been there. It might be a long night, a long day. Let me give you the benefit of the doubt. You
Right.
know, I'm not even going to tell you what I do for a living, right?
Right.
But
Right.
then, like, the way I was treated
Yeah.
was despicable. You know,
It
like
really
I was
was.
treated like a drug seeker, like
Mhm.
legit, like
No, it was infuriating to watch that. And I mean, at one point, I was talking to some other friends of ours, and it's like, we need to fly out? Like, what's going on? Like, this is
yeah.
ridiculous. Like,
And it was bad, like, and I think honestly, that probably had led up, like that one incident that night probably contributed to me having to stay an additional week because I end up having to go back
hmm
to a different hospital and get admitted. You know, instead of
right,
getting the proper treatment right then and there.
right. That's right. You did,
I,
because it was a really it was a long crisis. That was a long, yeah. And
yeah,
you were on location, you were traveling, you weren't at home, and yeah, and it was all of those things, where you don't have somebody right there as an advocate. And for folks who don't know, I'm a private patient advocate, and this was a very distressing period for me.
and,
It was very distressing to watch how you were treated, and to feel so helpless and powerless, and just infuriating
and you
experience.
know the interesting thing was it wasn't even like I was uninsured. You
Right. I
know,
mean, you had
I
all
was
the things. You have all the
like had
things.
everything,
Right.
and more so, I'm disappointed because one, they didn't know how to treat sickle cell patients, like right.
Right.
They didn't know how to teach sickle cell patients. They didn't even follow the proper protocols to treat sickle cell
Right.
patients.
Right.
And I'm like, like, are you serious? Like, and it disappointed me that I was questioned by a emergency room physician
Mhm.
whether or not I had sickle cell or not. Like what?
Right.
Like,
It, it
you gonna ask me? What was it? I forgot. What was the question you asked?
right.
Are you sure you have sickle cell or some? I forgot what she asked. It was some crazy stuff she asked me.
Yeah.
Like you gotta be kidding me right at this point. Like you're gonna question
Yeah.
whether or not I have sickle cell. Like I don't just
Yeah.
come into the emergency room and make up stuff like that. You know, like
Yeah.
that's a simple blood. If you're unsure about that, it takes 10 minutes. You send it to the lab. 10 minutes, the results back and tell you I have it.
Right,
It's,
exactly. It's not something that is going to, take 5, weeks to get a diagnosis on or confirm. And, like we are taught, and as nurses, to look at your patient, treat your patient, look at the symptoms,
mm-hmm.
and also it's respect. It's about dignity. And, this was just straight out racism. This was just
Yeah,
straight
and,
out
and, and,
racism, no doubt.
and as a matter of fact, I remember the question. She asked me to prove that I was. She asked me to prove that I had sickle cell. Like what? How
As
you
if you carry a card or something around, or right.
like? Prove that, like, I'm here in the
Yeah.
emergency room in pain. You want me to prove that I have sickle cell and I'm in a crisis, like,
Yeah.
as if, like, like that makes absolutely zero sense, you guys. Zero sense
It
whatsoever. When you could have just sent down a lab, and they didn't send it. The only lab they sent down on me was a urinalysis. I wonder why.
right,
Wonder
right.
what they were looking for.
Exactly. And that's another thing. I mean, we know, like, we don't ask patients to, oh, if they come in, I've got cancer. We're not, are you sure you have cancer? We don't say that, right? And
Yeah, can you
so,
prove to me you got cancer?
yeah.
Like
So,
what?
yeah. This was a
And
yeah,
they,
and so I would love to talk to you again more, have another, maybe we could do an episode and just talk about sickle cell, like do something where we're really educating
hmm
folks about sickle cell. I don't know if there's other people that are in the medical profession that also, really are knowledgeable about it. I think that this is something very, very important. And also, you know, on top of, like, we have to actively, you know, people of my shade have to be actively working to dismantle racism, and especially in healthcare, if we are in the healthcare space. This disparity of treatment is, it hurts people, and it, and it's dangerous. I mean, there are, especially with sickle cell, to undertreat a patient or not treat them, a failure to treat is what it's called, is,
It make it worse.
there are legal ramifications. It can make the whole situation worse. It's emotionally distressing. It's, it can be costly for you, right? I mean, all
It
the
is
things you have.
extremely cost. It's not just costly for me. It's costly to the public
Mm-hmm.
because like you sending these children like from an early age and with sickle cell crisis, a lot of these children are uninsured or on Medicaid or Medicare, and they in there daily, like
Right.
every
Yeah.
other day, especially the ones with disease, right? And the interesting thing is, it is curable now at this point. Like,
Really.
yes, sickle cell is absolutely curable at this point,
Wow. And what is
right?
it?
It's a genetic, and the cure involves uh, com- a bone marrow transplant from a non-sickle cell carrier. They have to be a match with you. So what happens was they'll do a couple of weeks of chemo to wipe out your bone marrow
Wow.
and your stem cells, and then they'll transplant you with a donor that's not sickle cell positive or anything like that, and
Wow.
then they'll transplant you with their stem cells and marrow, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then that'll grow in your body. And guess what? Lo and behold, you're cured of sickle cell.
And is
It
there
is
an age
absolutely cured.
range that this has
Huh?
to be done? Is there an age range that this has
I
to be
think the
done?
age range nowadays is up to like 20 years old now. So I'm outside. I'm outside that window,
Right.
but I guess it's still considered experimental. But like they've
Right.
been curing it for almost a decade now through this method.
Really?
But it's still considered experimental, even though like hospitals across the big academic institutions have been doing this
Mm-hmm.
and finding ways to like make the process even better, like even like stem cells through IV and stuff like that, which is interesting,
Right.
right? But I guess I'm out of the age range, so
Mm-hmm.
they look at like if you got comorbidities and how old you are, or whatever, right?
Right.
So like if you catch it early and young enough, like in your 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, you can cure it right
And
now.
that's going to be something, right? That, I mean, if you're in that socioeconomic bracket or just education level, I mean, really anybody, honestly, because nobody knows anything about medicine or healthcare, let alone experimental research or studies or any of that. So if you're not told about that by your provider, by your regular doctor, not getting regular health care, or maybe
Hmm.
you're not near a big research facility or large medical center, you may not even know. So that's really
Yes,
important information
they
that
have cured. They
you
have
have to
cured
be
sickle
proactive.
cell like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, probably thousands of cases of sickle cell they have cured here in the U.S. at
Wow.
these at the UCSFs and Cleveland Mayo clinics and CHOP in Philadelphia and all these places, right?
Oh,
Typically,
gotcha.
like so, the interesting thing about sickle cell disease is not a lot of there's more resources for children of sickle cell than adults,
Right. Right.
right? Typically, like up historically, like you didn't live long with sickle cell disease, so it wasn't the need for like a adult population management of
Interesting.
sickle cell. But children, like most adults, go to like children's doctors and stuff like that.
Right. Right. And I've known of that with people in their 20s that have it, that they're still seeing a pediatrician level. And so has the life expectancy, the treatment paradigm changed in it? Is it a longer life expectancy now?
I think it's a longer life expectancy because they have kind of protocolized how to treat it.
Right.
As far as like hydrating,
Hmm.
transfusion have become more prevalent. Doing transfusions, blood transfusions, stuff like that.
Gotcha.
So it become more normalized in the sense that how to treat it, and they have up to date research. So I think life expectancy increase just a tad bit
Gotcha.
in that
Right.
regard. And
Gotcha. Is that a driver for you also of your
what
motivation? Is that a motivation, a motivator for you in your life?
having sickle cell disease?
Yeah, or I mean, life expectancy or
Yeah, I would say that, like it's always your mortality is always in the back of your head, like especially I'm turning 40 this year,
mhm.
so it's always back there. Like, will I live as long as like a normal person,
Mm-hmm.
to 80 or something like that? Probably not, to be honest with you. But while I'm here, I just want to accomplish as much as I can and make sure my children are good to go when
Yeah,
I go,
100%,
But
100%.
yeah,
Leave that
yeah, like
legacy.
eventually, like I can't get the cure for sickle cell, so like I gotta
Mhm.
take everything in strides, and it's nice. I guess some people say it's nice. You get a different perspective of life when you know that
Mhm.
you're probably not gonna make it as long as a normal
Right.
person.
Well, and also being, in the military too, right? And being deployed, and I mean, you
hmm
also
And
have
I
to
think
think
that
about
helped.
too.
I think that helped me a lot. Like just being forced to like push myself to the limit, even with sickle cell for as
Mhm.
long. Because most sickle cell patients, they don't do as much as I'm doing.
Right,
They
right.
they're in pain constantly. They're not out working out and doing things like me. They're
Mhm.
not as healthy. So that's probably a contributing factor as well. And I think that has benefited me, the military, in the long run, for me to be where I'm at now,
Got to stay in
even with my
shape.
sickle cell disease. Even with my
Right?
sickle cell disease.
You got to stay. So let me ask you something about. So I've noticed, this is off topic, but just about the Army and Army veterans. I've noticed there's kind of two categories of people that are Army veterans. There's those people who are kind of do the X Games and are really into working out, and then there's those people who never want to see a gym again. For the folks listening, which category do you think you lean more to,
Ah man. Um
or do you have a healthy relationship with exercise even
I
after
got
the
a I
Army?
got an okay relationship with exercise. I could always use more, right? But I wasn't, just because of my sickle cell, I couldn't be one of those guys, right?
Right,
Because like, you know, it was a struggle being like, it was definitely tough being in the military, being with sickle cell, and knowing that I do have limitations as far as physical exertion, and
right,
I couldn't do a lot of those crazy things that they do just because my body won't let me do it.
right.
Honestly, my body won't let me do it.
Endurance is an issue, right?
Yeah, endurance is an issue. I push my endurance to the limit.
Oh,
If
I
if
bet.
we're gonna say that,
I
like, I
bet.
push my endurance to the limit. I can say that, to the limit, just to stay in the military as long. I had to push it to the limit, like each and every day, right?
I can
So,
imagine.
and even at my limits would never be as great as some of those young kids coming out of high school with nothing wrong with them in the world.
Right, right,
But
exactly.
I did what I can, and I advanced through the military just the same as everybody else,
Yeah.
even with my limitations.
And
So
we
I
know
can
you're out there
respect
thirst trapping. You're out there thirst trapping on TikTok. We've seen you. We've seen
that.
you.
So I can respect that fact that, like, hey, like, even at like half capacity of most people, like my limit
Mhm.
is probably like a half capacity of most people. I still managed to rise in rank and be a great leader in the military, just like it, just the same as everybody else, which
Yeah,
tells me that, hey, when I look at you and you giving me these excuses, like you have no idea, like
right,
if I would never had sickle cell, ooh, Lord, look out.
right. Yeah, it's humbling too. And, that's just, we all have our own whatever issues or things going on, but, it's
Yeah.
also the testament of being really committed, right? Showing
Yeah, I'll be out
commitment.
here running New York marathons and shit like that.
Right. If they're gonna
I'll
give you
be-
money for college, I mean, it's like
yeah.
but it's so thank you so much, Randy. I really appreciate you being on the show. And is there anything else you wanna leave with our audience if they're listening or watching?
Yeah, I would say that, you know, the health is wealth. Like, as long as you got your health out here, like you could do anything in life. There's really no excuse why you can't get up in the morning, go for a 30-minute walk, or go running a couple of miles. Like, I wish I can, like, just on the day, just roll out of bed and do something like that and not have to worry about throwing myself into a sickle cell crisis. I
Mhm.
wish I could do that. I wish I had that endurance to do that, go climb Mount Everest or some shit like that. You know what I mean? But I don't, you know. But like I push myself to my limits every day. As far as education wise, like, you know, it's obtainable for anybody.
Mm-hmm.
You want to be a CRNA, anesthesiologist, engineer, whatever. Like, it's all about having mental stamina, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
all about waking up in the morning, opening a book and just reading and trying to understand every day, even when you don't want to do it.
Right.
Even when you don't want to do it. That's what sets most people, like, everybody can't be a genius like my wife, right?
Right.
Everybody
Right.
can't be a genius like her, right? But what you can do is you could get up, open that book, and study every day, right? You might
Mm-hmm.
not, it might not come to you right away, but eventually you look at something so many times, you're gonna figure it out. You're gonna unpack it, unravel it. So like,
Mm-hmm.
you don't have to be the smartest person in the world to go to medical school. You don't have to be the smartest person in the world to go to CRNA school. Most of them are average students, to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
Only thing that set them apart is they may have had help getting into medical school. If you look at the new statistics that come out, you know, most of them come from wealthy backgrounds,
Mm-hmm.
and the fact that they just crack that book open every day and, hey, I gotta read something, you know, and eventually it clicks in your mind after you see it so much time,
Yeah.
and that's how the vast majority of society work. You do something over and over again, you see something over and over again, you understand it, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's only like 1%, less than a percentage of people that's just super smart and just know things right away. You
Right.
could solve Rubik's cubes and stuff like that.
Look, I can't even, I
So
still
like,
can't do the Rubik's Cube. So I,
yeah, so
I'm
like,
right here.
I fall into the normal people category. The difference between me and someone that's not doing much out there is that, you know, you probably was easily influenced by your environment versus like putting in the work. It's just putting in the work. That's the difference.
And not letting anything deter you, right? And being
Hmm.
able to pivot. One really important skill, and I thank you for sharing that. One really important skill that I hope, especially young people, really understand is the ability to pivot and adapt. That
Yes.
sometimes things don't work out exactly how you want, and you're going to have to go a different route. You're going to have to figure out a different path, or pull something out of yourself that you maybe have never known about you. And that's how we grow and we learn as humans. And that's just something that you don't quit if things don't work out. If you're committed to having
Never give
something,
up.
don't give up, right? Keep going and figure it out, and keep networking, reaching out, get
Yeah,
mentors,
I love
get
it.
help, do whatever it takes. Don't be scared of working 3, 4 jobs and pulling some all-nighters if you got to working, and maybe you're not gonna, you gotta sacrifice. You made a lot of
Yeah.
sacrifices.
You guys have more, and I like this new generation because they a lot, they finding out what you guys are coming out with way different ways of making money, of earning a living, like not just
Yes.
the traditional way like you and I do. Like, you guys are on
Right.
social media, you're capitalizing off of technology more so than our generation, because even though we were the generation to bring the technology into play, you guys are born into this. Like, we had to learn how to use it. You guys were born into this. So
Mm-hmm.
I respect you guys for utilizing that, not settling for like
Mm-hmm.
less.
Yep.
You guys are not going with the traditional. Hey, I'm just gonna work here until I die. You guys are unionizing. Like, hey, we
Yep.
demanding more, or we not tolerating it no more.
Right.
The old
Exactly.
traditions.
Having standards, because we're in a really rapidly changing society for sure. Well, thank you so much, Randy. I really appreciate you coming on. And folks, is Randy, and for folks listening, how do they find you on social media? And tell us your
Oh,
handle,
okay.
where you're at.
So my Instagram is Randy CRNA. My TikTok is one badass CRNA. And my YouTube is, you probably could Google Randy CRNA and a video of me will pop up, and
All
you
right.
could follow me on there.
It's complicated? Is that the name of your channel?
Yeah, that's the name of the page. It's complicated because I'm a complicated
Right.
person. I do a lot of things, but then I do crazy off the wall stuff. That's just my personality. So it's complicated when it comes to like
Yeah.
how,
You're out of the
how I
box. So
think
yeah, if you
and
want
view
to
the
catch some
world.
good lives on TikTok or Instagram, follow Randy, subscribe to his YouTube, which you already got a few thousand subscribers. That's awesome. You've got quite a few. You're doing really well on Instagram and on your channel on TikTok. So, you're
Yeah. Yeah, it's a full time. I feel like it's a job doing social media now.
it is, and hopefully, you're getting paid, and that's a goal, right? We want to be paid. So, and
Yeah.
well, thank you so much. We're gonna finish up this recording. Thank you for watching. Where if you're watching this on YouTube or you're listening on any platform that you're getting your podcasts on, it's Being the Space, Nurse Adrian RN podcast. Subscribe, follow wherever you're at, and thank you guys so much for listening. And we're gonna end this now, and we'll be getting another episode to you guys soon. And again, thank you so much, Randy.
All right. Thank you.